Growing up in the shadow of success is never easy, especially when your family measures worth by the size of your office and the numbers in your bank account. I'm Anna Mitchell, and for the past decade I've been the family's favorite cautionary tale. It all started when I chose to leave my cushy corporate job at Anderson and Mitchell Corp. Yes, that Mitchell, my father's company, to start my own consulting business. To say my family was less than supportive would be an understatement. "You're throwing away a perfectly good career," my father had said, his disappointment evident in every syllable. "Vice president at 25 and you want to become what? A freelancer." But I had seen enough from my years inside the corporate machine. While my cousins James and Victoria climbed the corporate ladder at various Fortune 500 companies, I noticed something they didn't. The real power wasn't in the corner offices. It was in the shadows, in the consulting firms that actually ran these corporations from behind the scenes. So I started small, working from my tiny apartment, taking any client who would give me a chance. 4 years I operated under various business names, building a network of shell companies that all led back to one entity, Phoenix Consulting Group. Nobody knew I owned it, I made sure of that. As far as the business world was concerned, Phoenix was run by a mysterious board of directors who never showed their faces. The truth? It was just me orchestrating everything from the background. Today marked our annual family reunion, a tradition that had become increasingly painful over the years. As usual, it was being held at my Aunt Margaret's sprawling estate in the Hamptons, where success was measured in square footage and luxury cars. "Anna, darling." Aunt Margaret's voice dripped with false sweetness as I arrived. "Still doing that, what do you call it? Freelance thing?" I smiled politely, clutching my modest handbag Gucci, but last season's model. Not that they needed to know it contained contracts worth millions. "Consulting, Aunt Margaret." "Yes, I'm still consulting." My cousin James, now CFO of a tech company, snickered from behind his champagne glass. "Consulting? Is that what we're calling it now? Last I heard you were working out of a WeWork space." He wasn't wrong. I did have an office at WeWork, one of many decoys I maintained to keep my real operation hidden. Victoria, my other cousin, joined in. She was wearing a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Poor Anna, still a nobody after 10 years. While we're all executives, she's just a random consultant. "What a disappointment," Aunt Margaret added, shaking her head. "Your father had such high hopes for you." I took a sip of champagne, hiding my smile. If they only knew that tomorrow at their company's biggest deal signing, they'd learn who really runs Phoenix Consulting Group. You see, James's tech company had been struggling lately. They needed a major restructuring consultation, and they'd hired the best in the business, Phoenix Consulting Group. What they didn't know was that every recommendation, every strategy document, every proposal they'd received had come from me. Tomorrow they would be signing a $50 million contract that would give Phoenix complete control over their restructuring process. And the best part? The contract required the presence of Phoenix's CEO for the final signing. As I watched my family brag about their achievements and mock my choices, I couldn't help but think about tomorrow. About the moment when they'd realize that the nobody they'd been ridiculing was actually the person holding their company's future in her hands. My phone buzzed, a message from my executive assistant. "Final contract revisions complete. Everything ready for tomorrow's signing ceremony." I typed back a quick "perfect," and returned to listening to my family's condescension. Let them have their moment. Tomorrow would be mine. The next morning, I dressed with particular care in my custom-made Chanel suit, not the flashy kind my cousins favored, but a subtle, deadly elegant black ensemble that whispered old money. My Louboutins clicked against the marble floor of Phoenix Consulting Group's real headquarters, a sleek, understated office in a historic building downtown, not the WeWork space my family thought I worked from. "Good morning, Ms. Mitchell," my executive assistant Sarah greeted me. "The team is ready for the signing ceremony at Mitchell Tech. Legal has triple-checked the contracts." I smiled, remembering how James had bragged yesterday about Mitchell Tech's revolutionary turnaround plan, my plan, though he didn't know it yet. "Any last-minute changes from their side?" "No, but..." Sarah hesitated. "Your cousin James has been trying to negotiate better terms all morning. He's called 3 times demanding to speak with Phoenix's CEO." "Has he now?" I picked up my briefcase containing the final contracts. "Well, he'll get his wish soon enough." The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Mitchell Tech's headquarters. As I pulled up in my understated Tesla, another detail that had earned mockery at family gatherings, why not a proper luxury car? I saw the usual crowd of executives entering the building. I took the private elevator to the top floor, my access card working flawlessly. I'd had it programmed months ago when we started this project. The conference room was already filling up with Mitchell Tech's board members and executives. James stood at the head of the table looking proud in his designer suit. Victoria sat beside him. She'd recently joined Mitchell Tech as their marketing director, another nepotistic appointment that made my blood boil. "Where is Phoenix's CEO?" James demanded as I walked in. "We're not signing anything until they show up." "The CEO will be here," I replied calmly, taking my seat. "And who invited you?" Victoria sneered. "This is an executive-level meeting, Anna. We don't need consultants here." Before I could respond, the door opened and Aunt Margaret swept in, followed by my father. Of course they were here. Aunt Margaret was on Mitchell Tech's board, and my father never missed a chance to oversee his family's business dealings. "Anna," my father said, surprise evident in his voice. "This is a private meeting." "Yes, it is," I agreed, standing up. "And it's about to begin." Right on cue, Sarah entered with a team of lawyers from Phoenix. The room fell silent as they distributed the final contracts. "But we can't start," James protested. "The CEO of Phoenix isn't even here yet." I walked to the head of the table opposite James. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room, "the CEO of Phoenix Consulting Group is here." Victoria laughed. "Oh please, don't tell me you're trying to take credit for arranging this meeting? Know your place, Anna." I pulled out my business card. Not the consultant card they were familiar with, but my real one. The one that read, "Anna Mitchell, CEO and founder, Phoenix Consulting Group." "I am in my place," I said, sliding the card across the table. "Right where I've always been, running the company you've been desperately trying to impress for the past 6 months. The color drained from James's face as he picked up the card. What happened next would become family legend. The silence in the room was deafening. My father reached for my business card with trembling hands, examining it as if it might be counterfeit. This is impossible," James stammered. "Phoenix Consulting Group is a billion-dollar company. They've restructured Fortune 500 companies. Yes," I said calmly, opening my briefcase. "We have. And now, we're here to restructure Mitchell Tech unless, of course, you'd prefer to work with a different consulting firm." I paused, letting the implications sink in. "One that hasn't already spent 6 months analyzing your company's weaknesses?" Victoria jumped up. "This is a trick. She's lying." Sarah stepped forward, distributing folders to each board member. "Inside you'll find verification of Ms. Mitchell's position, including Phoenix's corporate registration documents, major client lists and press coverage from the past decade. You'll notice we've operated under strict confidentiality, which is why the CEO's identity has remained private until now." Aunt Margaret was frantically flipping through the documents. But the WeWork office? The small clients? The modest lifestyle? I smiled. "Appearances can be deceiving, Aunt Margaret. Something you taught me, actually. Remember when you said, true power doesn't need to show off? Though I suspect you meant it differently." My father hadn't spoken yet. He was staring at the financial statements in his folder, particularly the line showing Phoenix's annual revenue. $8 billion, he whispered. "My daughter built an $8 billion company." "Now," I said, sitting down and opening the contract, "shall we discuss the terms of Mitchell Tech's restructuring? The contract requires my signature after all." James collapsed into his chair. "The recommendations, the strategies, they all came from you?" "Every single one," I confirmed, "including the suggestion to replace the current CFO with someone more qualified." I met his eyes. "Someone without a history of overlooking major financial risks." Victoria gasped. "You're firing James?" "Phoenix Consulting Group is recommending new leadership," I corrected. "Whether Mitchell Tech follows our recommendations is their choice. But our contract does give us final say on executive appointments during the restructuring period." "You can't do this," Aunt Margaret protested. "We're family." "Exactly," I replied. "And family should want what's best for the company, shouldn't they?" not just what's best for themselves. I turned to my father, who hadn't taken his eyes off the documents. "Dad." He finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen before: respect. Pure, unqualified respect. "All these years," he said quietly, "while we were judging you, mocking you, you were building an empire." "I learned from the best," I replied. "You taught me about business. Aunt Margaret taught me about power. James and Victoria taught me what not to do. And I took those lessons and built something bigger than any of us." I picked up my pen. "Now shall we sign? The markets are waiting for the announcement." One by one they signed. James looked defeated, Victoria furious, and Aunt Margaret shocked. But my father, he was smiling. After the signing, as the lawyers filed out and the board members dispersed, my father stayed behind. "I was wrong," he said simply. "We all were." "Yes, you were," I agreed. "But that's business. Sometimes we win, sometimes we learn." He laughed, actually laughed. "When did you become so wise?" "Probably around the same time I became a disappointment," I said, but without bitterness. Success was the best revenge after all. That evening, as I sat in my real office, the entire top floor of a downtown building, I received dozens of messages from family members who'd heard the news. Aunt Margaret invited me to discuss opportunities. James wanted to explain his side. Victoria sent a lengthy apology. I left them all unread. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working on Mitchell Tech's restructuring plan. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't just their relative anymore. I was their CEO's boss. And I had an empire to run.